Hello, everyone. Give everyone a chance to get their audio connected. Hello. All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the WSU Community Engagement Institute's Rising to the Challenge workshop series. We have been very excited by the response to this workshop series, and we're incredibly thankful for your support, both long-term friends of CEI and those of you who are new to us. My name is Mary Montgomery, and I work with the community and organizational development projects here at the Institute. I'm joined today by our facilitators, Joyce Crane and Seth Bate, who will introduce themselves shortly. I'm going to be running things behind the scenes for our webinar today, so if you have any technical issues, please feel free to chat with me, or you can email us through the workshop invite or through the email on the workshop invite. And we're recording this session today, so you'll be receiving a copy of the slides and the handouts in a few weeks following the session. We will have a short evaluation at the end of the session, and we'd appreciate it if you give us honest feedback about our work. The purpose of the Community Engagement Institute at Wichita State University is to collaborate with our partners to facilitate learning, develop innovative solutions, promote equity, and build capacity to create real change. Our ultimate hope is to see vibrant communities and dynamic organizations that are supported, connected, and effective in making progress. You are at the final workshop of our 6-part workshop series, and this session is about an exciting topic that some of you may not have ventured much yet, but I bet you'll be excited to bring these ideas back to your organization when we're done. So right now, I'm going to talk briefly about the purpose of our workshop series, a few Zoom housekeeping items, and then I'll hand the workshop over to our facilitators. So this series is about how we rise together in the face of challenges, and we at CEI want to let you know that we're here as a resource for you as an interested community partner in all times, but especially in times when you and your teams may need some extra support and sense making. Our hope here today is to learn from each other, to challenge some of our assumptions and habits around how we do or sometimes don't navigate conflict effectively in our programs, and to connect with one another. So to do this with comfort, I want to walk us through a few housekeeping items related to Zoom. So with a group this size, we'll have everyone on mute for now in this big room, but when we go out into breakout rooms, we encourage you to unmute yourselves and engage with your group through voice and audio or video. Use the chat throughout this whole presentation. We will absolutely want to hear your ideas, comments, and perspectives, so don't be shy about using our chat box. And we absolutely love it when we can see you. It brings more energy and helps us feel more connected, and it helps us read each other better. So please try to have your camera on at all times if you can. Please use the rename function so we know exactly how to refer to you. And I'll put the instructions in the chat on how to rename yourself. And then we are recording today's session so we can replay what happened today and see how we want to tweak this session in the future. And we're going to try to make the recording available to you if you request it. So as I said earlier, Seth and Joyce are ready to have a great conversation with you today. So I'll hand things over to Seth.
Thank you, Mary. Trying to see if the slides are catching up to me. There we are. So I want to say a couple of things about my friend and colleague, Joyce Crane. I know Joyce to be somebody who has a heart for the rural experience and farm life in Kansas. I know Joyce to be somebody who has studied in really exotic places like Scotland and Texas. I don't know which of those feels more foreign to me. And I know Joyce to be somebody who is always excited about new experiences and interactions with people and who has continued to demonstrate a commitment to learning far beyond anything that's required of her. So it's always exciting for me to get to work with Joyce.
Thanks, Seth. Well, I also know that Seth has a real heart for rural life. In fact, he lives a rural life down close to Winfield, and I have a great appreciation for that. I also know Seth to be an amazing foodie, and if I need food recommendations, if I'm traveling, Seth is my go-to. And Seth is also someone who is a go-to for anything music or theater. So if it relates to the arts and performance and entertainment, Seth's my go-to guy for that as well. And he also has an amazing heart for leadership and coaching. He's a fellow coach along with me, and I love working with him. So thanks again, Seth, for saying yes.
Absolutely. Yes, I was at Wave Saturday night, as a matter of fact. So let's talk to you. I mean, we could spend the whole time talking about food and music, right? But that's not our purpose for being here. Let's talk about what today's work is about. We'd like to, in our hour together, make 3 moves. One of them is to make the case for why this topic about coaching and organizational culture matters right now. One is to introduce some of the foundations of coaching skills in organizations, some of the schools of thought that have led to that, and some of the ways that we think about coaching skills in organizations. And the last move we want to make in our hour together is to invite you into a conversation about what it would look like to develop a coaching culture, and specifically, what are the things that you might try to move toward a coaching culture in your organization. Of course, because it's an hour-long session, we aren't claiming that we're going to get to deep answers for all of these. And our experience is that we can go pretty far and pretty deep in an hour if you all are fully engaged and ready to interact and learn along with us. So shall we start with why now, Joyce?
Yeah, I have a lot to say about this one because I've been watching the landscape in coaching and just kind of watching what's been happening, specifically related to bringing coaching into more of our corporate environments and more of our nonprofit and education environments. So it's kind of a fun area to watch this transformation happen. But just so that we're clear, we're talking about cultivating a coaching culture. So I wanted to let you know how we're thinking about culture. I have taken this definition from Timothy Tiriaki. He's from the Maslows Center for Executive Leadership. And so we're talking about those values and behaviors that contribute to making an organization or a business unique in its social and psychological environment. So it could be related to any shared attitudes or beliefs or ways of doing things. It's also about both those written and unwritten rules that have been developed over time in an organization that help people know how to navigate the organization. So as one of our colleagues used to say, it's sort of like that invisible hand on your back. Culture is like that hand telling you what to do and what not to do. It tells you to go here, not there. It tells you to look this way, not that way. It might also tell you to talk about this thing, but don't talk about that thing. So all of that stuff lives and breathes in cultures. And so it makes organizations and businesses complicated and hard to quantify. But we feel those things in our organizations, right? So that's what we're talking about when we're thinking about culture. And there are a lot of influences on culture, but one of the ones we're going to focus the most on in this talk is the influence of managers and supervisors, because this is where we're seeing the most change in how businesses are looking and organizations are looking. So Gallup, who many of you are probably familiar with, does a lot of research. And one of the things that Gallup says is that managers and supervisors are the single biggest factor in an organization's long-term success. And of all of the components of an organization, there's really nothing that comes close to the impact of managers and supervisors. So it's also the number one reason why people leave their place of employment is because of the relationship with their manager or their supervisor. So this is really an important thing that we're talking about. We think and we know organizations will rise to the quality of their managers. So the higher quality you get from managers and supervisors and their work, then that's about where the organization culture sits. So it's quite simple. If we can look more at managers and supervisors, we can learn a lot about what to do and what not to do. So there's a lot of other research, as I said. Specifically, this research on the screen comes from Gartner and Quantum. And it shows why coaching skills are so important for managers to have. When polled, 65% of employees say that they want more feedback. But when you talk to managers and supervisors, only about 35% of them say they feel like they're very effective at giving feedback. So here we have employees wanting it, We have managers and supervisors saying they don't feel very like they can give good feedback. And a lot of them say they just aren't confident enough to coach their employees well. So and they could also be impacting their employees negatively by not coaching them well. So we really think that this is important to think about. This slide is not working. I'm going to have to send this to you. I'm not sure why it blew itself up, but let me see if I can scroll a little bit and make it smaller. Nope, I'm not going to be able to get it all in there. I don't know if Mary or Seth can work on getting that, and maybe we can throw that into the chat. But we can give you a link to find this Maslow's Hierarchy of Needs at work. Okay, so we're not talking about the Maslow's Hierarchy of Needs that most of us studied at some point in school. This is specific to work. And it's really helpful because it helps us understand why using coaching could be the antidote to helping empower those supervisors and those managers to creating the best work environment. So when you study, if you could see it, this hierarchy, I'll just tell you about it. It becomes a lot easier to see that. So historically, we would hire employees based on skill and talent, maybe years of experience, but we usually have this assumption that once they get in there and maybe we do some onboarding, that they're getting their needs met on the job. And we really haven't historically paid as much attention to the fact that when they get there, there's actually so much more that they need. So you can see, you can't see the smallest concentric circle on here, but it says basic needs. If you know Maslow's hierarchy, you know it starts with basic needs like safety and security. But when you think about your workplace, the things we're talking about with basic needs that employees need, it's things like tools and technology. It's things like training and support. It's things like job security, fair and equitable pay, benefits, a clean, safe environment, especially in the age of COVID, equipment that's ergonomical and it's healthy for their bodies. They need access to supplies. They also need break time and vacation and the ability to work from home at times. So those might also all be called sort of basic needs. And then on this picture, you can just see sneaking in their psychological needs. So psychological safety relates more to that sense of belonging and that sense of esteem at work. So when you think about belonging at work, it may be something like social connections or this sense of camaraderie or a feeling of emotional support. It might be something like a sense of feeling included, that your voice matters, you're psychologically safe to be you, to show up and share your ideas, and that people pay attention to you and listen. It might be about collaboration and having colleagues that you can work well with and that there's effective teamwork. It could be about opportunities to learn and grow and learn new things on that job and exposure to various roles, maybe getting mentoring so that you can learn about other potential roles you can move into in an organization. And then finally, it's about appreciation and recognition and celebration of what people are doing, but showing some appreciation and formal recognition of how people are being in your work and a celebration of their successes. And then the next level, you can see this growth needs is showing up just briefly. And that's really more about self-actualization. So all of us at work need some sense of purpose. When you have a clear sense of purpose, it goes beyond, and when your employees all have a clear sense of purpose and how that purpose fits with the mission and vision of your organization or business, then that clear sense goes beyond profit. It becomes embodied in all of your leaders, and it gives people a meaningful sense of their work. When you have a people-centered culture, people-focused workplace where policies and practices and procedures are really derived from employees and employee engagement, and it's not all top down, where it's only coming from the top and your employees don't have some say in that kind of culture. You have leadership presence and cohesiveness. The leaders work cohesively together. They model how to manage conflict and conflicting views in the workplace without losing perspective or respect for people. And then you have leaders as coaches and mentors. So people who know that part of the culture is that we help other people grow. We help ourselves and other people grow and reach their goals. Because ultimately, if everybody can come to work and be their best selves, individually and collectively, our businesses thrive, our organizations thrive. So having that true sense of cultivating other people as individuals and meeting their unique needs is really important. So by examining the workplace through this kind of lens, we start to pay attention to a lot of aspects of the workplace, and we start to understand why it's so important that coaching is one way that we could address almost all of these needs for our employees. So just a couple more statistics related to the coaching field in general that you may or may not know about. If you look at 2011, so we're 10 years from there, right? The average return on investment for companies that invested in coaching was 7 times the investment. So what you get back out of your employees, the profitability of the company or the organization, 7 times that investment. And in 2015, the International Coaching Federation, which is an organization that Seth and I belong to, and the Human Capital Institute did a study that linked a strong coaching culture to measurable results in a stronger bottom line. So it's saying something similar there. Excuse me. The Institute for Corporate Productivity says there's a significant correlation between having a strong coaching culture and market performance. So again, we're just seeing that this kind of culture makes people, helps people show up and be their best, and therefore the business does better. So it's paying attention to the people. And then Harvard Business Review in 2019 article said the role of the manager, in short, is becoming that of a coach. So we know in our culture, we're moving away from the traditional sense of how management was always done and starting to see managers as people leaders, as people who are paying attention to what people need in the organization. So that's a lot from me. Seth, I'm just curious about, there's a cool quote on this slide. Maybe you can tell us about that.
I will, and I was already going to read it, but your slides are still at a smaller percentage, so I'm definitely going to read it now because that's real tiny on my little screen. So I want to make 2 points here, and I think this quote helps make both of them. One is, I think there's sometimes a sense when we're talking about formal coaching, getting a coach, that's intended to be for executive level folks. And that is increasingly not true. And that's part of what Melanie Richards said in this cool BBC interview a few years ago. The other thing that Joyce and I want to acknowledge is a coach-like interaction and a coaching culture also creates these benefits among peers. So we don't have to just be talking about supervisor and employee relationships. But and if anybody wants the link to this longer interview about how companies are using executive coaching, I'm happy to share that, and it's on the slide. But what Melanie Richards from KPMG UK said includes, I think coaching is important at every level, and we offer coaching right from the bottom end of our organization right to the top end. Now, if you can imagine this being read in a really posh British accent, it would also have more weight. So I'm not going to try to do that to you. She goes on to say, I always get worried that there's this notion that senior execs are ethereal beings who have some special need. I don't think that's true. I think the difference is the type of support that you might be giving to somebody at a more junior level. People don't arrive in their positions at whatever level fully baked. So this idea of coaching interactions and coaching being a way to help all employees. And among the ways that we think coaching can help include, I'm not going to read all of these, but I'll hit a few of the important ones, to create a vision of the type of leadership and the type of employee they want to be, to create to identify opportunities for growth. So one of those things that's directly tied to what Joyce was saying, using that Maslow illustration. To define measurable and accountable plans for development. So that idea that over time, people are more clear about what they're moving toward and they can trace that. And positive team development and accelerated leadership development. And in that, we're talking about leadership development in both frames that we think about that. So we're talking about people who are more quickly able to do the activity of leadership effectively, and people who are more quickly ready for positions with increasing responsibility. Some descriptors that we think are helpful when we think about managers and supervisors who are trained in coaching include these things. And these come from what people in a company described. So the managers and supervisors who do coaching tend to lead by example, tend to demonstrate that they're invested. So, you know, that idea of putting skin in the game. I'm not crazy about gambling metaphors, but you know, that one's out there. They tend to challenge people to grow, learn, and develop. They tend to connect employees to opportunities. They listen actively, and they discern and also give feedback. Before we move on to the next slide, I'd love to see a few answers in the chat. Of these 6 descriptors of managers and supervisors who coach, which of these, if they happened more in your organization, would contribute the most to a coaching culture, or would contribute the most to the kind of positive culture that you want to see in your organization? Let's see what you add in the chat. So the first 3 answers are 3 different bullets. I love that. So lots of listen actively, some lead by example, connect employees to opportunities. All right, so I'm offering this so you can think about, you know, what's a specific thing that you might see happen if you focus more on this kind of coaching culture, but also so you can start to think about what kinds of things you could do that would contribute to a coaching culture. Yeah, and keep them coming, but let's move the slide forward and start moving into our first opportunity for breakout conversations. And Mary, if you could put these questions in the chat so people can refer to them. We're going to ask you to discuss these 2 questions for about 5 minutes in breakout rooms. And again, a reminder, if you're possibly in a place where you can use your video in a breakout room, it really adds to that conversation. The questions are, what does coaching look like in your organization or business? And how effective is coaching with creating a positive, productive culture? Now, if your organization right now doesn't utilize coaching at all in the way we're talking about it, that's okay. We'll learn from each other about what it can look like. There will be, I think, time to hear a few brief call outs from this breakout room. So listen to the brilliant things that your new best friends in the breakout session say to think about what you might want to share in the larger group. Are there questions about the assignment? All right, let's have a 5-minute conversation focused on these 2 questions.
Sorry about that one slide. I'm not sure how that came out looking like that when I pasted it the first
Yeah,
time.
it really didn't like that one.
I did get a little screen grab of that slide into the chat eventually, so they have a picture of it.
Yeah, me
Thank you.
me too. So Mary and I both put it in the chat.
Good, thank you for that. Yeah, that was just strange.
I got a couple of flashes that I was having unstable internet. Were you having audio issues from me?
No audio, just video.
Okay. Well, I'm not worried if my video's freezing. See some people back. Seeing the number climb. All right. I hope you have some new lifelong friends. After having that deep conversation for 5 minutes, we invited you to start thinking together about what coaching looks like in your organization and how effective is coaching with creating a positive, productive culture. Let's hear from one or two of you out loud, and as many of you as want to contribute in the chat. But what's something that stood out from your conversation? Go ahead and come off mute or use the hand raise button.
Well, Seth, this is Ron Fisher. I'll break the silence. We are doing some specific things here at the Department for Children and Families, Kansas Department for Children and Families. We have really taken note that our managers and supervisors are the key. They're the gateway to the culture change. So we've been providing specific opportunities for leadership training for them and development. And those that have been signing up to go on that path, we've been able to offer them specific one-on-one coaching and group coaching environments with their colleagues. So that's some stuff we're experimenting with, and we've had good experience with that here.
Fantastic, Ron, thanks. Could we get one more voice in out loud? Something that stood out from the conversation?
I was in Ron's group, and I thought it was interesting that they actually have people dedicated to that within their organization, because for us, there's so many people across campus at the Wichita State University is that that opportunity is not really there in-house, and you have to seek it out of house unless you happen to be in a department or under a manager that has received training in that area themselves, because they're so academia related.
Well, Marcia, let's you and me work together to change that at Wichita State. I bet we could make some progress. All right, thanks. And other answers that you have, please keep them going in the chat. Joyce, one of the moves we said we wanted to make today was talking about some of the foundational ideas that influence coaching and this idea of a coaching culture. Are you ready to share some of that?
I am. Yeah, so this is I think a final missing piece to this puzzle around thinking about coaching and how really coaching got started in businesses and in organizations when they're trying to look at the culture shift. And it comes from the field of positive psychology. So if that's not something that you're familiar with, I'll orient you briefly to that field. So positive psychology, it was a movement, or is a movement, or orientation that questioned the culture of psychology that was dominant in the 20th century. And basically that culture where psychology had flourished was really about studying problems and psychopathology and deficits and trauma, et cetera. And we have a lot of knowledge about those things, and we've developed a lot of tools to help people in pain and in dealing with some of those deficits or traumas, and that makes a lot of sense. But part of what happened is we started developing this culture of deficit. And we created more classifications of human dysfunction than we did of human flourishing, and really trying to understand what makes people thrive. So positive psychology questioned that dominant culture and said, where there is pain and suffering, there is also amazing and wonderful things that people bring to the table in our workplaces. What if we studied what's right with people? What works well with people? How do we align with their values? How do we help them align their values with our organizations and help them bring their strengths to the table in their work? So positive psychology isn't about canceling everything we know about those, what we might call deficits or more dysfunction. It's really about adding to and having a more balanced view of people. And then how do we tap into that part of people? So a lot of early studies show that, and studies lately show, actually, if you can help people focus on what's right with them, what's good with them, help them bring those things to the table, they're actually more engaged at work, they're more productive at work, and they just thrive at work. They bring more of themselves. And so coaching itself starts actually from that place. So the most positive coaching starts from a place of understanding people's strengths. It starts from this place of what's the vision somebody holds for themselves and how to help them thrive and work toward that vision. So that's how we think that coaching can really help with changing cultures, is when you start to bring what's right with the world, so to speak, and what's right with people to the table. Lots of studies showing that if you help people focus on the positives, the positive emotions, the strengths, etc., the happier they are, the more successful they are, etc. So we think that's really important when we think about coaching. So Seth, what about this mindset? How can we develop that further?
Yeah, so the idea of positive psychology really points to the mindset that we step into as coaches and that we believe is accessible to all of us. Now, just to be clear, coaches are not psychologists, or if they are, it's because they have studied both things. So Joyce happens to be a psychologist who is also a coach. I'm very much not a psychologist who is a coach. And I appreciate being able to take the lessons from positive psychology and bring those into my coaching without claiming to have expertise on the psychology side. One of the ways that a coach approach lives out the positive psychology facets is the idea is that coaching is performed with this positive mindset. And in the same way, positive psychology doesn't say, trauma doesn't exist. This positive mindset isn't a Pollyanna view that says the whole world is great all the time, but it's a very focused belief in the person or the team you are coaching. And it's a conscious choice to believe that in the space of the coaching interaction. So when I coach, I make a conscious choice to listen through this empowering belief that I have about the person or the team in front of me. I believe that that person or that team is creative and resourceful and whole. I believe that that person might learn more about themselves because of some questions I asked or some space I create, but not that this person needs me to create answers for them. And I try to listen that way, but also to speak that way and to even think and feel through this frame of that coaching mindset. One thing that's important about that mindset is that it is a conscious choice. I can't say I spend all my waking hours in that space, and that it's renewable. So when it goes away, and my dear colleague Chad is on here. So if I'm coaching Chad and I have a moment where I think, oh, there's Chad being Chad again, I can come back and say, no, I'm renewing this mindset that I have about Chad and the things that I believe about Chad. Now, coaching is also a set of skills, and that's not really our focus today, but those skills include presence and deep listening and powerful questioning. But the people I train as coaches often come out and say, it's the mindset that really changed my life and changed my approach. Because of this coaching mindset, we believe some things that otherwise might be difficult in an organizational setting are more possible. And one of those is the idea of feedback. So, are you ready for some feedback? I'd love to hear a couple answers out loud, and as many of you as want to weigh in the chat. What's your reaction when you hear from a colleague or a supervisor, "May I offer you some feedback"?
Normally for me, hearing that makes me think it's probably some constructive criticism, possibly.
Mm-hmm.
So before I came to my career here at WSU, I worked for a company where feedback was the name of the game. Everyone it was a gift, and you always take your gift. What you do with it afterwards is up to you. You can keep it, you can regift it, right? But it's a gift and you must accept. So we really got acclimated to the notion of when someone say, "Hey, I got some feedback for you." I still to this day take a little deep breath, only because I know I need to accept the gift and don't react. And so, but I still always take a breath, but I'm very thankful for it. And I think had I not been raised for 10 years in that culture before that, I wouldn't have realized it really is a gift that someone's willing to extend what could be a tough message even for them to share. So it really is a gift, but I take a deep breath.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Rebecca, and I relate to it a lot, that I also have grown to appreciate feedback and my colleagues who give me feedback. And that moment is still a sharp intake of breath moment for me. Now, I see some people in the chat who range from yikes to bring it on. And I think that's generally our experience. But the feedback is one of those organizational F words, right? And as Rebecca alluded to, going to the next slide, I think some of us have that same bit of apprehension when you know you need to provide some feedback. So good to be aware of that. What we believe is that offered from this place of a coaching mindset, feedback is a gift. And let's just keep the next slide going too, Joyce. Yeah. So a coaching approach to feedback is the idea that feedback comes from someone you trust. So a colleague or a trusted supervisor who has a strong coaching mindset and has your best interest in mind, that it's offered as a gift, an opportunity for learning and change. And I love the way Rebecca put it, because it's a gift, then you also have some control over how much you use it and how you hang on to it. And that it's paired with good listening and open-ended questions. So my instinct is, and some of the yikes comments suggest to me, this isn't always the way that our organizations approach feedback. Let's keep talking about one aspect of feedback that I think is especially useful. So feedback includes some things like informing, so just providing some information and perspective on past behavior and current behavior, appropriate in an organizational setting. Can include challenging, so I want something from you, and here's how we are going to measure it, and I'm going to invite you to grow. But the aspect of feedback that I think comes most deeply from this coaching approach, and that I think has the most opportunity to change our cultures, is what we talk about as acknowledging. And I want to acknowledge that we're using some Kansas Leadership Center material here as we're describing what we mean about acknowledging. So acknowledging is naming what's awesome and naming what's less awesome, but saying what is so in a way that is energizing for people. And this can include naming weaknesses or inconsistencies, but it's the idea of speaking the truth in a way that inspires change. And here are some things that acknowledgement might include or might sound like. So it might include affirming an emotion or a strength or an ambition that you see. It might be observing or validating an experience. So I saw you speak up at the meeting this morning and the idea didn't create any traction. And I just want you to understand that I noticed that. Might be identifying areas for growth and improvement, or more specifically, and I would suggest more helpfully, naming some contradictions and inconsistencies. Sometimes these are easy to spot around self-care. So Jimothy, I hear you telling your staff that they should take their time off, and I see you haven't had a vacation day in 90 days. Is a piece of feedback that is pointing out an inconsistency. This is kind of varsity level work, but it could be offering a metaphor about how you see somebody work. One of my favorites is, I see you like a prairie fire, burning away what's no longer needed and leaving room for growth. Wasn't that poetic? Wasn't that great? It might be speaking the truth about a situation, and it's certainly acknowledging success and encouraging celebration. So these are some ways to do acknowledgement, which we believe is part of feedback, which we believe is one way that, taken from a coaching approach, we can change our cultures.
So I think I'm going to skip this one, Seth, and go to this next question, because I'm really curious since we started this conversation, and I'm starting to see some of you all get connected with this word feedback and acknowledgement. I'd like for you to talk with each other in a breakout, a short breakout. What would be different or better if you received this kind of feedback on the job? So all the stuff that Seth just talked about, what would be different or better if you received that kind of feedback? And then I also want you to talk about what would it take for your organization or business to be the kind of place that encouraged that kind of feedback from supervisors and from managers, rather than people telling you what to do. If they were able to give you feedback and help you figure things out and learn from that. So what would be different and what would it take are your two questions. So only about 5 minutes. Any questions? If not, we'll see you in 5. Welcome back, everyone. For the sake of time, I think I'm going to ask you if you would like to share, to put into the chat something you learned in that breakout session about what could or would be different or better if your organization was using that kind of feedback. Again, thinking about this field of positive psychology, really focusing on people's strengths and helping them develop, as opposed to looking at more performance-based coaching or feedback where it's about starting from a deficit. So that's what we're trying to ask you to focus on here. So anything you want to put in the chat, and then I'll hand this to Seth.
Yeah, we want to move toward our last move, I guess, today, and start thinking about what you could do to be encouraging a coaching culture in your organization. So as you're developing a coach-like culture, I'm going to invite you to reflect on your own for 2 minutes, and I'm going to hold the silence here. What is one thing you could do right away to move toward a coach-like culture in your organization? And or what is one thing you could partner with others to do in the next 90 days to move toward a coach-like culture in your organization? So here's 2 minutes on your own. We'll hold the silence to think about it, maybe write yourself a few notes. So using these ideas that are in your head, or maybe you've written down as a springboard to give you some energy, we're going to ask you to have one more 5-minute conversation. Pick 1 or 2 of these questions that Mary's going to drop in the chat, and please discuss in small groups. So one question you might choose is, what would be the benefit of a coaching culture for your organization? Another is, if your organization took on a coach-like culture, what could that look like? How might you take this idea back to your organization? How would the organization feel different if there was a coach-like culture radiating through it? Remembering Joyce's idea that you can feel culture. 5 minutes, choose the one that speaks to you, go have a final great conversation.
Just waiting for the rest of the group to join us. We are still waiting for folks to just get back from that conversation we had. We'll give them a few seconds to join. Okay. Looks like everyone is joining us back. Thank you so much, Seth and Joyce, for your thoughtful facilitation. We know that we had to move quickly today, but if you all would like to dig deeper into any of these concepts with your team or in a coaching setting, please feel free to reach out to us at joyce.mcewcrane@wichita.edu. And I'll go ahead and throw that in the chat. Along with that in the chat, I have a link to a very short 4-question survey. So please go ahead and click that and let us know what you thought of today so we can continue to develop these offerings. Within the next week, you're going to receive an email of these materials that we use today, along with some other prompts and resources on this topic. I want to thank you all very much for your time. If there's anything that you have questions about or points that you wanted to make, affirmations you wanted to make, we just want to give you a couple minutes to do that in the chat on your way out. And from Joyce, Seth, and me, thank you again for your time, your attention, and your engagement today. So thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful afternoon.